is not right about me. I'm not a subservient in this society. Therefore, I belong with same equal measure with any citizen of this world. How is that now become anti-white? Because I do not talk anti-whiteism. Every day when I engage black people about the fight for their liberation, I talk to them as a pro-black person. I tell them about themselves. So we need to be very clear about these contradictions. Black people, let us not be distracted. We know that some people are trying to distract us. Sometimes they will point the problem in the same black community. We know where they are going. We know where they want to be. They've told us that they are government in waiting. They've told us that they want to replace the ANC. They are very clear, they've told us. So if that's what they are fighting for, let us not distract ourselves. These people are not fighting the same fight as us. If they want to be managers of this anti-black state, it is fine. Let them go there. Our fight as black people is we want monopoly capital. That's where we are going. Let us distract ourselves with many people. The time doesn't permit for us, comrades, to talk any further. But I will stop here and say, Israel, the Africa, yo, I go shoot it. Tatum Laut, Buanati.
Amanda, yeah, thank you very much. Upon my arrival here, I lost my paper. I'm only left with my pen, but there's no problem. You know, I just want to acknowledge being invited here and also to acknowledge the input by my fellow panelists. I also to appreciate, I really want to differ in a fundamental sense with people who are having a problem with the topic. When you exist as a human being, you have a right to pose any question. That is why Fanon, in his book, Black Skin, White Mask, he says, as a black man, I don't know which questions are proper to ask because the world denies me. So the moment someone sets you a paradigm of thought, it has a presupposition that you will ask certain questions which are not going to challenge the status quo. That is a fundamental thing. But also, I want us to, of course, I agree with most of the things that have been raised here. And I'm going to iron out certain things where I feel they are historically insufficient and ideologically they will not hold water. Look, without being too abstract, here we are, we have a country called South Africa, and it has a particular history. People came as a result of European expansionist politics and economics. They came. Upon their arrival, there was no procedure, there was no protocol. The only law which they used was the law of violence. Upon meting out violence to the black bodies, two things occurred. The violence they used was to take land away from black people. That is a historical reality which occurred, which we cannot dispute. But where we must not fall short and begin to vulgarize Fanon is to say the dispossession of land was an end in itself. The dispossession of land was a means to an end. And that means was economic profit maximization. And therefore it meant land was taken so that to create a pool of wage earners in the nascent industrial capitalist, in your nascent capitalist industry. So that is the essence. Therefore, the question of land and labor cannot be separated in our context. I'm raising this issue because there are different forms of colonialism, and I will make a typical example. That is why I also differ with some people who speak on Fanon and they give us, misconceptualizations. Look, in Africa, there were different colonialisms. And I will make two classical forms of colonialism, the French colonialism and the British colonialism. And we will see what are the economic, political, social, and philosophical implications in how we understand our social reality. Under French colonialism, mostly, land was not taken away. Therefore, the implication was that the peasantry still remained. But in our country, the form of colonialism that came over took land away, so that a pool of the so-called working class is created, so that it works in the industries. Now, so the question of labor and land, you cannot separate it. The other thing, because violence was used, there was a particular justification that, hey, to justify our violence, these are not people, these are subhuman. That was the philosophical justification, and that is why, of course, the essence of Black thought comes in to say, it is what you have spoken about, self-love and self-reaffirmation. Because at a time when violence was used, there had to be a justification. Because violence cannot be used on a human being. And therefore, for you to create a thing out of a being, you want to take out ethics and morality so that violence becomes the organizing principle of the political and economic discourse. Now, the other thing which we need to be clear about, therefore, is that the so-called 1994 and the 1990, the breakthrough never started in 1990 or 1994. Basically what has happened, that is where I just want to come in where you spoke about the international political economy system. The most important thing is that the assumption, which is wrong, which we might have, is that the white family was united. The Treaty of 1910, which resulted in the formation of the Union of South Africa, was the merger between two capitals, Afrikaner capital and the British capital. During the 1970s, there was an international economic crisis. And then inside, there was a realization that capital accumulation is no longer going to continue, is no longer going to find expression. Therefore, divisions in the white family began between Afrikaner capital and British capital. That is why, yes, that is why Afrikaner capital, in actual fact, never wanted negotiations. And British capital went behind and negotiated with the leaders of the ANC. We cannot deny that. Negotiations started in exile. And someone who can testify is still alive. He's around, he's here, he has written so many books. Sam Peter Blanche, who was part of the Afrikaner community, Afrikaner intellectuals who were part of the negotiations. Now, if we believe that the white family was united, we are making a problem. Yes, it was not united. Especially in our context. It was not united, especially in our context. The Afrikaner capital and British capital were divided over what is to be done in the South African context. British capital wanted to maintain imperialist relations. Now the Afrikaners were afraid of a crisis of identity. If we give them political power, Afrikaans only exist in South Africa. It is a dialect. It is not a fully fleshed language in other countries. Therefore, we are going to have a crisis, and it goes back to the colonialism of a special time. You find the colonizer and the colonized existing in one territory. Then what is to be done? But also the other thing which I want to emphasize, which I also agree with the speakers, is that if someone comes at a home, you are there as a family of 5, and then your father is being attacked in your presence or in the presence of your siblings, and then your father at the point of attack, he is taken behind the house and decides to agree on certain terms and conditions in your presence. Let's take a dialectical approach. Not only the father becomes the sellout, even the household and the siblings. So when you take a dialectical approach, if Mandela sold out, it is not only him, but people who were part and parcel of the political discourse at that time. And therefore the entire political establishment is corrupt. And I'm coming close to that. Jake, you are going to engage. You are going to engage. The other thing is that, also the problem we have, I am yet to see a revolutionary like Biko and Grizan who does not only spew rhetoric, but who is able to be part of the so-called masses of our people and lives a very ordinary life. Everyone else, everyone else, even now. That is why I don't want the question to stop as far as Mandela is concerned. Even the present generation that talks left and walks right. We ourselves, in fact, the argument that one could make is that the entire political establishment is corrupt. The entire political establishment is corrupt. Even those who are proclaiming to be wanting to conduct a revolutionary takeover or whatever. And I will make some few examples. The moment we stop operating on the basis of a handed down agenda, where we are in one township and we don't speak to each other as a result of the battles of the power elite there, it is the moment we are going to start on a genuine revolutionary process. Unless we do that, there are differences, even in the ANC, or there are differences between ANC and other opposition parties. We are living in the same township called Claremont. We are experiencing similar socio-economic conditions, but we don't speak to each other simply because of the power dynamics of the political elite. In fact, they determine the agenda in taxis, in our classrooms, even where we drink and have coffee. The agenda that is handed down to us by a corrupt political establishment is determining our lives, but we are claiming to be revolutionaries. The other thing, I want to come to the question of racism. Without vulgarizing Fanon and his teachings, he explained it very well, that decolonization is a process of complete disorder. And then thereafter, people began to say, Fanon was an apostle of violence. I just want to qualify philosophically the notion of violence. Fanon was saying, black people's humanity was taken away, brutally. Now, when black people are making an attempt to become human, the white system closes the avenues. Now, in the absence of communication where we can convince one another, because if we converse and we have a communication, it means I can convince you, you can convince me. But in the absence of communication, I cannot convince you. Therefore, the absence of communication necessitates one thing, because my life is pushed against the wall. Therefore, I will have to defend myself, and violence as a form of self-defense. And self-defense for life, I am justified to become violent in order to reconstitute my humanity. So I just want to make those a few remarks to say, lest we vulgarize Fanon and sacrifice Fanon in teachings at the altar of our political expedience. But lastly, so, the only true and genuine route to economic emancipation is socialism. And that is always propagated as the young communist defense.
Thank you, Mr. Laut. Baba Kateri, can I hand it over to you?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Let me begin by, just because I teach political science, I want to answer this question, was Mandela a sellout? But the way I'm going to answer this question is, I'm going to talk about a few things. Let me just begin by referring to a statement that was made by my homeboy. He went to school at Nabalazu, the same high school that I went to. Next to Nabalazu High School, there's another high school called Westille, right? 2 years ago, I was invited to go and motivate the students there. And when I arrived, the school principal, who used to be my mathematics teacher, introduced me to a businessman. I want to tell the story. He introduced me to a businessman, and this businessman is not from Wamash, and his race is not the same as our race. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because after being introduced to this businessman, I started thinking to myself, who is us and who is them? Now, here we're supposed to answer the question, was Mandela a sellout? Now, the question is, who was Mandela? I mean, I've been listening to the speakers here, and when I give a say question, I usually say, I'm giving you 10 lines to answer my question. So I'm going to be very brief. I'm looking at the time here. Now, who was Mandela? Now, I was listening to the speakers here, and I'm trying to figure out if they told us exactly who Mandela was, and if Mandela was indeed a sellout or not a sellout. Now, when I was reading about Nelson Mandela, I read that he's a guy from a rural area. And Mandela was also a Christian. And Mandela went to Western schools, so he was Western educated. And Mandela was also well-traveled. You can imagine a black man back in the 1950s and 1960s getting to travel around the world. So we're talking about Mandela here, who's a very dynamic human being and who obviously evolved over time. So that, you know, someone was talking about Mandela before he went to jail, and Mandela after being released from jail. Now, after saying all of this, this is what I want to start saying now. Mandela was a politician, and I teach political science, right? Now, in politics, the first thing I tell my first year students is that, as you saw here, this was politics in action, right? So now the point is that, you see, as human beings, we are different. We are different in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of sexual orientation, right? We are different in terms of ethnicity. So there's so much diversity. Even right here in this room, you can see this diversity and these diverse views and opinions, right? Now, so that the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I want to say that, so when I introduce the subject of politics to my students, I tell them politics is interesting because as human beings, we differ, right? Now, I want to talk a little bit about these differences. Now, the study of politics itself, there are different views of what politics is, but I want to limit myself to two views of politics. There's politics as the study of compromise and consensus, and then there's politics as the study of power. I want to talk about these two very quickly, and I want to answer this question, was Mandela a sellout? The first view of politics as compromise and consensus. Remember I said, as human beings, we are different. So because we have to coexist peacefully, right? So we have to make compromises. It goes without saying, right? So that we can reach some form of consensus. The post-apartheid South Africa is a product of the compromises that were made during negotiations. And by the way, Nelson Mandela was part of those negotiations. I don't think it would be fair to single out Mandela. But at the same time, I want to answer this question. But probably the most interesting view of politics that I want to focus on is politics as power. We live in a world where you see exercise of power all the time, whether in a relationship between two people who are in love or a relationship between friends, but there's always that power dynamic in every relationship, right? Now, so again, the question is, was Mandela a sellout? No, when Mandela came out of jail, almost all the countries in Africa had been liberated, if you will, or had become independent. Now, look at Africa. Today in South Africa, we have millions of Africans from Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe alone has got probably, we have more than 2 million Zimbabweans. We've got people from Nigeria, from DRC, all over Africa, they are here. Now, Mandela comes out of jail, and he's seen what has happened all over Africa and in other post-colonial states. And he takes a decision. He says, look, you know what, let's negotiate. And he understands the balance of forces, right? He understands the balance of forces. See, I'm going to tell you something, make no mistake. We are a powerless country. If you look at countries, we have what are called developed states, right? Those are powerful states. So Mandela comes out of jail in a world where we see more globalization, right? So South Africa trades with other countries. We have to cooperate with other countries because we are not an island. So Mandela understood the balance of forces. I've got about 2.5 minutes. So Mandela understood the balance of forces, and he negotiated. And obviously it wasn't just Mandela, because he represented the ANC. So what I want to say here to answer this question is this. You can call Mandela an Uncle Tom, you can call Mandela a sellout, but let me tell you, Mandela, I think it would be fair. I mean, it would be unfair, sorry. It would be unfair to call Mandela a sellout. I think, I'll tell you personally, I'm going to be quite frank about this. I'm a big fan of Nelson Mandela as a person. Why? Because I'm not a politician. I'm just speaking as Zakeni. I'm going to tell you this. The fact that a man like him came out of jail and somehow tried his best, tried his utmost best to keep South Africa a stable country. There was so much tension. You saw the tension here, right here. Like imagine in the early 90s, right? Race, tensions around race, even around ethnicity. Some of you here were not born, but I was there. I could see the so-called black on black violence, tensions along racial lines. But see, Mandela had a very tough job, and if I were to grade him, I would give him at least an 80 out of 100. Of course, I've got less than 40 seconds. Let me say this. Nelson Mandela was a human being, he was a man, and as human beings we are not perfect. He was not perfect by any measure. But I think under the circumstances, I would say he did an excellent job. And I think it's up to us now to make sure that we take South Africa forward. Now, as a teacher, I'm going to say this quickly. As a teacher, I want to say this, and every opportunity I get, I take it to say this quickly. When you are a student here, make sure you get good grades, excellent grades actually, so that you can make a meaningful contribution, so that you can stop pointing fingers and blaming Nelson Mandela.
comments because we want you to also be engaged in the debate. Then I'm going to come back to my panelists to wrap up the debate, to respond to some of the things that were raised here, because I do believe you need to have that opportunity. So I'm going to take, because there's 10 minutes allocated for comments and questions, I'm going to take 5 hands. And those 5 hands will each be allocated 2 minutes. So I already see hands. You are number 1, Banda, you are number 2, you are number 3, can I come here?
Greetings guys, my name is Yongo, I'm from DRC. I'm International Semester on Westille Campus and a vision of International Cultural Community. I just want to make a comment regarding Mandela. We say in ICT, International Cultural Community, that a man is 3 parts: his body, his spirit, and his land. So, if you can see African fighting for the land, it's making sense because they're fighting for parts of them. And we believe that the land is not the problem. The problem is, the land is a consequence of the problem. The problem with Africa is the problem of man, the problem of passion, and the problem of organization. These are the basic problems that we have, and that's gave us this actual position we have of losing the land that belongs to us. If you can get back to the colonialism, can you get back to the imperialism? Sorry for the microphone. I would like to say that we lost the land, but not everything. Because if you see leaders like Mandela, Patrice Emery Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, those great guys really fought for the freedom. They were also human. I watched one of the interview of Nelson Mandela after being jailed. They asked me a question: why didn't you pursue the same goal you had before the end of the journey of moving away white people from the land? And his answer was really personal. I was expecting him to give an answer that would involve the community, but he gave a personal answer. He said, if you are really human being, after 27 years of journey, and you come out still fighting for the same thing you did, it means you don't like yourself. And so that answer really pushed me to believe that they were also human, and we don't need to blame them because they did the best that they could. Thank you so much.
It might be a comment, it might be a question, you might think about it in your own space, I don't know. If you look at the policy document of the ANC towards land, it speaks about restitution and distribution. You made a comment that the ANC does not look into the issue of land. So it's a comment you can tell me to look into that. Passing forward, we go to the issue whereby the ANC has abandoned the economic system whereby it empowers black people. I think you should be very careful because in the ANC documents towards economy, it speaks about growth and development. The question being posed: how do you ensure growth and development in the economy is not own? If we speak about growth, we speak about output and GDP activity. But at the same time, we should not focus on those factors because it's development of a person, self-esteem, culture, housing, and shelter. So the ANC speaks about growth and development in a society which is owned by white people. Give us what we want to control the economy, and then the demand market forces the government to go forward. That is a comment to the economic system of the ANC. I would like to go to Nicole. And so it was a Nicole, the husband, and
Number 3 was? Please, ladies and gentlemen, can you please exercise restraint? I think we've behaved very well. don't want us to end on a sour note. Over to you, Baba.
First, maybe one before he makes his comment, but I want to pass my disappointment from our economists and the political analysts, because those are people that I believe were supposed to intensify this debate, spark debate, so that we will be able to engage in details as the academics of our country. But when you are failed by the academics, people that we rely on, it shows that we are but you know, only what our panelists have addressed us on. I met the one from the ANC, the Manda. He spoke at length about the document of the ANC, the strategy and the tactics, the NDR, what the ANC wants to achieve. But now the rest of the panelists, when they were articulating, they only came here to critique what the ANC is doing, but not gave the alternative to what the problem that the ANC, to what the thing that they foresee they should be implemented in order to deal with the triple challenges that are faced by the country. What we wanted to do is that if ever the ANC and Mandela himself sold out, I'm not sure if this thing is here, if ever sold out, then what is the change?